Gentlemen, and everyone joining, welcome to the course ID SBA 101, which is titled The Intro to Smart Building Automation. So, what is not a smart building? What is a smart building? All about the network topology, such as BACnet, and devices connected to it, such as IoT sensors. I am your host, Ari Rubin. I am responsible for consulting at KMC Controls, and we are honored to have a KMC guest, Tim Vogel, who is responsible for connected solutions at KMC Controls, and our featured guest, Emmanuel Manuel, who is responsible for, I would say, digitization of the commercial real estate universe at Microsoft. And he'll go into that a bit more. I want to say that we have this scheduled for the third Friday of each month. And so similarly in February, we'll have on February 16th at the same time, course ID HVA 101, which is the Intro to Integrated HVAC and Airflow Management. So I just want to give you a heads up. We'll have some incredible guests and similar discussions, and we'll look forward to your feedback during this call. So I think without further ado, I'd like to introduce the guests here. We have Tim Vogel and Emmanuel Manuel. And Tim, what is a smart building? What is not a smart building?
A great question. So, smart building in a traditional sense is how are we connecting the critical systems that are running that building? Anything from the environmental systems, HVAC, heating, cooling, air exchange rates. How are we ensuring that it's healthy? All the way to lighting. How can you make sure that it's safe in there, that people can see what they're doing, that whatever the task or use of the building, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's office workers, whether it's retail, that those tasks are able to be accomplished. Those are the basic, people moving, elevators, escalators. So all that comes together, and the infrastructure that makes all those things possible, like utilities and or internet. So traditionally, then in a smart building system is how do I run all of those systems as efficiently as possible so that they are communicating and cooperating. We've been able to do that for a long time with direct digital controls and centralized workstations. But now with the advent of things like cloud computing and analytics and all kinds of new technologies that are making things faster and easier and more accessible, the whole definition of smart is completely changing. And so someone that would have said 20 years ago a smart building is, running Niagara, some VAV controllers and making sure CO2 doesn't get high. Now they're saying, well, I want it to tell me exactly what's wrong with my building and which device is having an issue. And then I want it to go and change the set point in that device so that it doesn't happen again. And if it could change the programming as well, that would be wonderful. And then if it could only notify the service manager when it's the most critical or when a building is down before the tenant or occupant knows, and then make sure that my service guy has all the parts and pieces that it needs, and he could access a digital twin to know exactly what he's getting into once he gets there. That is where we are today and making all
Thank
those
you.
things happen.
You triggered an interesting thought, but I'll ask the thought in a moment, but before I get into it, hopefully through one of you, I want to ask Manuel the same question. You certainly have the perspective of a property owner and property manager, as Microsoft has many campuses around the world with hundreds of buildings for tens of thousands of employees and contractors and other visitors to your campuses. So what is not a smart building? But also, as you're addressing that, what Tim brought up
Mm-hmm.
reminded me that well, okay, that's when the building's up, but there are different phases, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be that in the design phase, you could actually imagine the building, what it's like operating, or during the project management phase when you're constructing a building, and certainly when you're commissioning it. So I thought maybe you could get into some of that.
Yeah, sure. Sure. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Ari, for having me on the webinar. Absolutely delighted to be here and talk about a topic that's close to my heart. They would start with, I absolutely concur with what Tim was saying as to what is a smart building. when we started, or when buildings were brought up, the entire focus was on efficiency and optimization of the systems that go into the building, predominantly the HVAC and the lighting systems. Over that, as buildings have progressed, we've gone from pneumatic systems to electrical systems to digital systems, and the progression has been going on. But now, as the workforce demographics start to change, the nature and needs of people start to change. Okay, in addition to being smart with HVAC and lighting and fire alarms and safety, a lot of new attributes have started to come in where buildings not just focus on efficiency, but they focus on the productivity and the effectiveness of the occupants in that space. Where, yeah, I need good lighting, but do I care that what does good lighting mean to me? I don't care if the light works or doesn't work. I'm assuming the lights will always work. But how do we ensure that the lighting's wavelengths are at the right levels so the occupants are able to perform at the level of peak efficiency that they should? How do we ensure the quality of air? It's not, the we always talk about air quality in a building. We talk about airflow in a building. We talk about wind velocity in a building. But nobody really says, hey, how good is that air? Okay, is that air really good to open up and boost my cognitive ability in that space? That's where today we take all of the elements a building has, the environment in a building, both the light environment, the sound environment, the physical environment, and we combine that where we are shifting away from programming a building where we have set points and rules and says the building should do this under these conditions, where we're now telling the building, hey, change and dynamically adapt to the needs of the occupants. And that's the evolution cycle of how we started with smart and how we are getting to smart. Now, along that journey, people came and said, I'm probably one of them, that said, why should smart only happen after the building goes into production or after the building goes into operations? If we really have to make it smart, we have to optimize the entire value chain, and we should start at the design stage of a building. So how can you be smart when you don't even have a building there? Right? And the answer to that was you're smart because of the way you're going to construct that building to be as efficient and as sustainable as possible, because sustainability starts from the moment you hit that ground. Sustainability doesn't start after you turn on the building, because you basically have wasted all the CO2, all the emissions that you have not met, and then you suddenly say, hey, you know what, I would like to be green now. No, you have to start from day one. And that's why we said designing a building to be smart, looking at the data that we're going to use to ensure the building gets built correctly, tracking the progress of that building, and finally evolving ourselves into saying, you know what, now this building at the point of turnover into operations is the most efficient building. Because the other thing a lot of people forget is the new buildings are highly inefficient. Why? Because you have new systems in there. Everybody would like to test those systems, run them at max capacity. But why don't we make new buildings as efficient as they could possibly be instantly at the point of turnover? That's where the true smartness of the building life cycle starts to come in.
I have a question then. So, Emmanuel, in this construct, no pun intended, that you've shared, this, let's call it a digital twin, before the building exists, are you saying that you could look at the airflow, you could look at the air quality, you could look at even the risk for a building being hacked, and that you could, look at all the different systems and subsystems, whether it's lighting or plumbing? Are you saying you could model that and make decisions?
Easily.
So I guess that's a two-part question, yes or
Mhm.
no. And if yes, does that make a building smart, or is that perhaps a threshold, above which you're smart?
Mm. So to answer the yes or no part, Ari, yes, you can. Now the question is, when you start talking about modeling, we do a lot of modeling in construction even before the building gets built. We will do sunlight modeling, which direction does the sunlight fall on the building, and based on that, how much of daylight harvesting I can do. I'll do wind modeling in terms of my architectural structure that starts to come in. Okay, I'll also look at what is the right location to have open spaces based on heat and time of day, what the sun path is. What we don't do today is we don't do occupancy modeling and digital system modeling. Why? Because we don't feel that is required till we get into the commissioning phase of the building. What does that do? it starts to take away the combination of physical design with human engagement and modeling that to say that if I'm designing a space, what are the optimum points of engagement on that space? And how can I start influencing human behavior at those points? We all talk about water cooler conversations, it doesn't magically, you place a water cooler somewhere, people magically congregate towards it. If you place a water cooler behind a wall, no one even knows it exists. That's where the human engagement starts to come in. We start talking about people flow or crowd
Sure.
control. You can influence that behavior as you're able to take people on a journey through your building where you're driving productivity, engagement, and, like I say, accidental collisions where they meet and they drive innovation. Now, if I could use building data, behavioral data, demographic data, and combine that as part of a model during the physical design of my building, I
Brilliant.
can not only create an aesthetically beautiful building, but I can also create a highly productive and collaborative space in that building that people would love to come to.
That's
And
brilliant.
that's what we need
Let,
to
let me
get.
just interrupt. So, while I do so, I want to put the thought in the back of your mind, Emmanuel, if you could share something with this audience in some type of architecture that you're allowed to share, that would be most appreciative. But as you're considering that, Tim, I have a question for you. When you hear Emmanuel speak, I mean, this seems like he's at the tip of the spear. Are you, whether you're dealing with an end customer or whether you're dealing with a system integrator or a value-added reseller, is this the way that people are behaving now, with their assets? Are you hearing this?
I would say tip of the spear is a good or a good analogy for it because this is really some of the most advanced thinking in our space. There's a lot of specifying engineers, the top ones that are having more conversations around this. They're trying to find the vendors that speak and communicate in the same way. Few and far between, because a lot of your traditional business, is broken down into two main segments. You have your bid spec, and then like your owner occupied design build,
Mm-hmm.
so or retrofit. So if you're in the bid spec market, you have an engineer that is engineering the space, the end customer that has defined what they need the space utilized for. They're not necessarily thinking in this way. They're thinking, I have workers, or I'm going to have tenants that are going to have to occupy the space, and so those are my base needs. And then an engineer is going to go in and, again, typically build that building, engineer that building, architect that building to do exactly that. As soon as you start inviting more voices in, a consultant that's thinking in these terms, that's where the really interesting things start to happen. But then you start to get on the other side of the value engineering towards the end. Here's how much it's going to cost. It's like, ooh, that's a little more than I was expecting. And so they start kind of chipping some things
Right. There's
away.
always a break-even type of discussion.
Right. But then on the retrofit side, I think that is the opportunity where we could really have these conversations and help influence these owner occupiers and say, what are you really trying to get at? What if we could improve your efficiency 5 to 10% just by some of these nuance? It may sound like minutia to you, but every little facet that we're discussing has a compounding effect. So, you talked about light spectrum. What if that just keeps your employees awake more? We talk about CO2, but as you drive down CO2, you're also increasing
I
awareness.
mean, listen,
You're,
standards make a difference. Compliance to standards
Mhm.
make a difference. You go back more than a century, why did John D. Rockefeller become the first billionaire in the world? Is because the same logic you're sharing, Tim, which is attention to these details. For example, the
Mhm.
size of a barrel varied by vendor, and he said, let's standardize that. Let's make it so that we have an economy of scale, and that added up. It added up to a lot of things. So going back to forward, I applaud your thinking, and I'm thinking about different asset classes. Whether it's an office building, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a school, and I'm wondering if you're, and I want to get back to you in a second, Emmanuel. But I'm wondering, Tim, from your perspective and what you're hearing, because I know you have your ear to the street quite a bit, is there like a certain group of owner operators, decision makers who you might perceive as thought leaders or early adopters in this kind of thinking?
I don't know how I would define them. I mean, they're certainly out there.
Like
You
school
go to
systems, for example, or hotel owners, or hospital systems. Are you seeing something?
maybe some of the larger ones.
Okay.
Some of the larger ones are having those conversations because they have dedicated team members around sustainability, energy, interoperability. They're bridging things like IT and OT. I mean, it's such a cliche term, but that's really what they're doing. They're saying, okay, I have to look at these OT systems more. How do I bring that into my IT environment? Can I, monitor those the same way I monitor my IT network?
Well, you just
Those
said
kinds of
something that might be
conversations are
foreign to
happening.
some people. You said OT versus IT. Would you just take a
Oh,
moment to
of
define that?
course. So IT is your more traditional IP infrastructure, computer infrastructure, data servers, maybe your ERP systems or your CRMs. It's your classic business operational technology.
Okay.
Well, see, I just said operational technology. Operating your business using technology. Operational technology or OT is those, think base infrastructural understandings.
Like an
Uh,
HVAC
it,
system, for example.
yeah, HVAC system, lighting, a lot of what I said in the very beginning when I was defining a smart
Okay.
building or a connected building,
Okay.
it's those kinds of systems.
So there's really an
So typic
they connect.
Absolutely, you have a meter that's communicating over an IP device. It's an electric meter. IT probably doesn't know anything about it apart from when they, issued it an IP address. If they issued it an IP address at all, and it didn't just go DHCP to the guest Wi-Fi network.
Yeah.
But it's like now it's like, hey, as we think about cybersecurity,
Hmm.
as we think about interoperability and making sure that we're running policies consistently across the entire threat portfolio or threat fabric of cybersecurity concerns, IT is getting more and more involved.
Sure.
But
Anyway,
so it the people leading those conversations then are those that are most aware of those sorts of threats, while then also operating whether in a executive group or a board of some sort, a
sure,
committee, if you will,
sure.
for a business
But they
trying
have
to
to have the
operate.
alerts. They have to somehow have
Yeah.
that information visualized in a way they can make decisions. But Emmanuel, are you in a position to share anything with the audience to show, or could you describe it? What would you prefer?
Yeah, I could describe it, and we could always send the links out to the stuff that's been published out there.
So we could
The
probably set it up for downloads through the same link to this event.
Mhm.
So we'll cut that offline. Please.
the to Tim's point, Ari, the biggest thing that we have today is the influx of IT and OT dominating a building. So your earlier question, what is smart and what is not smart?
Hmm.
In the good old days, a decade ago, if a building's HVAC and lighting controls and fire safety controls were connected, integrated, had a schedule tied to it, the building was smart. Today, nobody really cares about that because I mean, it's become a base requirement. I don't go into a building which is not going to be safe because rules and codes and laws would not allow that building to be open to the public if they're not safe. I don't go into a building if it doesn't have lighting and heating or cooling because I would just be uncomfortable. So all buildings have the base requirements stipulated by codes to perform at a certain level, and they all have to adhere to it. I like to go into a space because when I go to that space, I feel connected. I feel welcomed. And when you talk about human behaviors, the ability to engage and make that human feel special is what it's all about. And it's like this. We were talking with one person, we were designing a building, and they said people would like to feel more recognized. And we're like, okay, do you want to give them an award? Do you want to call their names? And he says, no. Recognition happens every day when they come into the office. And then he said, what if we design the building where as soon as the person pulls up and walks into the building, you have a customized greeting for that person where the building welcomes them and says goodbye to them. Now, that would require coordination of your access systems. That would require coordination of who that person is, where they're coming in. That would also require coordination of I I looking at the signage to ensure signage is not construed or hidden away, and also in a way where people can start to appreciate, wow, look at that, the building is recognizing this person. simple behavioral motivations backed with IT and OT technology. IT technology from your access systems, your network layout, and your OT technology with your lighting control, your digital signage, all that coming in to be able to collaborate together. This could only be done if you're able to integrate data across multiple systems. That's where the convergence of IT versus OT is what Tim was talking about. And to deal with this situation, when we were doing our campus transformation at Microsoft, I led the campus transformation, and now I'm part of our data center organization where I look at digitization of EPC. But the whole aspect for us was, how can we be agnostic, but also at the same time not compromise on standardizing the data and the information coming through so we can orchestrate these experiences across multitude of devices? That's why we created something known as the DIP, or the Digital Integration Platform, where the goal of the DIP was to be able to ingest data from all the sensors, devices, controllers, building automation systems that we have, piece it together, create a microservices layer where we then orchestrate the services to create an experience customized to the demographics of the people that come into that building. Now, the question is, why do you need to orchestrate it? Because experience will start to vary. And Ari, your point that you hit on, where you said you talk about educational institutions, you talk about healthcare institutions, the why, because it's people everywhere. But if I, the office worker, go and take a class in a university, I don't expect the university to be an office, right? I would like experiences catered to me, the same human, as a student. And that's where we said, the even though the data may be the same, interpreting the data for the environment in which they are operating on is the intelligence that the buildings have to cater for. And we did this study when we were trying to design our experiences at Microsoft. We said, human life cycle. We as a human being, I've always been the same person. The my personality has not changed, but my needs have changed as I have gone through life and its life cycle. And we said Microsoft is a great place to work, and generally when someone comes into the organization, they stay here for a very long time. The What does that mean? I'm not designing a building for a person that joins straight out of college. I'm designing a building for a person that comes out of college, starts at an entry level position, works there, decides to settle down. They may fall in love, start a family. Then suddenly, from an individual, they have now become as a family person. They have kids. Kids, they then start becoming empty nesters. And then, as they become empty nesters, they also start becoming executives within the organization. So they may start here, but over a decade, they have a life cycle. Do I build a new building every day? No, I don't. That same space has to adapt to varied services that they require as they move along their life cycle. And I had this example where I said, the place where we live in, Redmond, it's beautiful suburb, very, very family environment. What does that mean? Most of the time, people will drop their kids off at school before they come into work, or they'll pick their kids up at school, after school, after work. So we enter into a gridlock. That's why people try to leave before the gridlock occurs. Now, in these circumstances, how can I help people get 5 minutes more with their kids to say goodbye? How could I get people to leave 5 minutes late and yet reach school on time? This is where the building systems come together through the
Right.
integration layer that we call as a digital integration platform
So it's a
to
total
create.
user experience.
Yep, that's what we do. That's how we start measuring what true intelligent buildings are, where you as the human, your needs are put first without you even realizing it.
So
You know,
interesting. You take the skills of an architect who has designed the physical building and another type of architect like you, Emmanuel, who has designed the digital structure of the building, and you fuse them together for a total user experience, which yields what you said. Tim, just before you ask that, I'm curious about one attribute of being in a Microsoft building. If I come into a Microsoft building, whoever I am, whether I'm an executive, whether I'm new employee, if I'm a visitor, a local politician, whatever, do I am I aware that the building's smart? And if I am, what does that mean? Like, how do I know? Like, for example, let's say there's a fire alarm. Is it different in one of your buildings than a typical kind of building?
So you have code requirements. Code requirements will ensure at a base level all the basic features across our building portfolio are the same. The beauty of an intelligent building, Ari, is you're not supposed to know
Okay.
because all your needs automatically will be met in terms of what is suitable for you. Your ability to find things will be quicker, easier, simpler. The optimized environment for you to operate in. If let's say you're coming in for a training session where you want to get an overview of what the latest
Hmm.
and greatest technology is,
Hmm.
the setting of the room, the adjustment of the lights, and the AV equipment will be set up in a way, and the environment will be set up in a way that is conducive to a learning environment. You're coming for an ad hoc brainstorming session. You got this great product idea that you want to discuss with Microsoft, but you don't know how to solidify it and say, hey, you know what, I just need this ad hoc brainstorming style. The organization of the space will be recommended to say, for this type of a meeting, this is how space should be set up and
Perfect.
organized.
Perfect.
These are
So I'm
the.
just thinking, I'm sorry
Mhm.
to cut you, but we have a few minutes left, and I'm just thinking you probably each have some concluding thoughts, but I'm wondering, have any questions come up from the audience that you'd like to share, either of you? I know we've all been monitoring our chat sessions, so Tim, maybe I'll go to you first. Any questions coming up?
Yeah, so the two things. One is Emmanuel, your comment about the how could you spend an extra 5 minutes with your family because of the optimizations that we're bringing. You and I, we recorded a Building Geniuses podcast last year, and that was one of the comments, or maybe even 2 years ago, and that was one of the comments that you brought up, and it has still resonated with me. And it is that persistent, consistent, and like almost hard nosed
Hmm.
approach to what is the reason why behind why we even have a smart building. So I thank you for your leadership and even continuing to tell that story today.
Same.
But then we did get one text from someone in the audience, so thank you so much for sending this. He gave an example of in 1931 there was a restaurant that was considered the first smart building. They installed automated doors so that the servers didn't have to open the doors, the employees and workers, and now that's a requirement for handicap regulations.
Hmm.
And his comment was, "What is smart today may be a requirement in the future." And as we continue to be able to, work out how can we use technology to really get to the heart of the why we're doing something, why we're even building these buildings, keeping that a laser focus is absolutely critical and key.
Thank you, Tim. Emmanuel, any closing thoughts or any questions that have come up to you?
Yeah, I think the closing thought that I would say is buildings today have to evolve with the needs of the occupants that are there. It's not heating, lighting, and cooling. It's just not these three attributes. Buildings today have to deal with inside and outside spaces because people can literally work everywhere. And buildings are no longer structures that we use from 9 to 5. Buildings are structures that we can use at any point of the day or night because that's the work style that we are getting into. With these situations coming in, the building is literally an open space. I go there when I want, I come when I want, and that space needs to adapt to my needs at that point in time. I can't say that, hey, the sun's not out, so we can't give you optimum lighting, so come back in the morning, that's the ideal time for you to work. If I want to work at 2 a.m., the lighting must adjust to my needs to drive the highest productivity for me. Those evolutions are what we are trying to work on, where we can choose to be the best at any time we want to be. And that is truly the direction buildings are headed into, that ability for humans and buildings to come together.
Thank you. We have about 1 minute. I want to give audience to one member in the audience to their question. I'll read this from it's I work as a commercial energy consultant, wondering what are the differences in inputs, the smart building automation for energy efficiency. What are some strategies that you've seen for energy efficiency? I don't know if we have time to address that question, but maybe in, 15 seconds, Tim. What do you think? And then Emmanuel.
I see the value of cloud connected solutions being a huge part of this because now there's a whole new data set that's now available to you to help you optimize energy. Weather is one of those, but also optimizing energy also has to do with the cost of energy at any given time. And so as we look at energy costs by the minute or by the 5 minutes, that sort of interval can say, hey, I'm not going to pre-cool just yet. I'm going to wait 20 more minutes and then pre-cool.
Perfect.
And I'm going to
Perfect.
save huge amounts of cost and energy.
Thank you. Emmanuel, your thought?
Yeah, the I think the biggest shift is going to be moving away from static scheduling and programming to dynamic scheduling and dynamic programming, where rather than assessing energy at a point in time and measuring it, you are looking at the energy readings in real time and adjusting your building parameters at that point in time. So your buildings are continuously efficient. Right?
Hmm.
It's the same data, but it is the action that we take to interpret that data and have real-time
That's brilliant.
responses, what we used to do in the
And that's a
past.
nice segue. So we have to close out this session, and I truly thank you for carving out time, Tim and Emmanuel. I know you're very busy people. And I, for one, as an audience member and a participant, am grateful. We plan to do the next event on February 16th, same time. And segueing from your comments is the introduction to integrated HVAC and airflow management. And this will be hosted by Tim Vogel this time, and then the guest will be Eric Kreuter who's the head of engineering, product development, product engineering at KMC Controls, and then Dr. Ian Nelson, who is the head of command commissioning. So we're going to go deeper into the tactical side. I mean, this is strategy and tactics kind of blending, but we have an opportunity now to go a little deeper. And as we go through the sequence of these courses in the next 11 months, we'll continue to go deeper and you'll graduate. And we'll try to make these recordings available to you for access. And with that, I'll sign off. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.